Finance and reads, what steps is the government taking to consider options for improving New Zealand's national savings?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, a focus on
I
national
apologise
savings.
to the Minister. We're not going to start we're not going to start the week that way. The Minister hadn't even opened his mouth and there was a barrage of interjection from the Labour front bench on this occasion. That's not in order. Interjections should relate to what a person's saying, not just be a sort of a widespread volley like that. The Honourable Bill English. Well, point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard, but I can't imagine what the point of order is.
Well, the question goes to Sir whether, in fact, this question should have been accepted, given that it contains irony.
Oh, order. Let me say to the Honourable Trevor Mallard, I don't think he has any questions on the order paper today, but even so, that kind of abuse of the point of order process will not be tolerated. I guess at least it might have had an element of humour to it that assisted on the occasion, but I do not accept that kind of point of order. The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, a focus on national savings is the next step in the government's program for rebalancing the economy towards savings, investments, jobs and strong economic growth. So today the government has announced the appointment of an independent savings working group with wide terms of reference. This group will focus particularly on lifting the level of national savings, not just household savings.
Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister of Finance. Why is it important that New Zealand increases its national savings?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, it's important partly... That's good.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, improving national savings is so important because of the damage the last government did to it. And they should listen. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand has run current account deficits for a very long time, and the difference between our investment and our savings has been funded by borrowing offshore. That offshore borrowing was $100 billion in 2000. It reached $170 billion by this year and is forecast to rise to almost $250 billion by 2014. If we can lift our national savings, we won't be as vulnerable to overseas lenders as unfortunately we are after 9 years of economic mismanagement.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Speaker, to the Minister, what did less damage to New Zealand's savings rate? Cutting New Zealand's superannuation fund contributions, cutting KiwiSaver incentives, or borrowing more for tax cuts for wealthy New Zealanders like ministers?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what did a lot of damage to our national savings and our external deficit was the last government. In the 4 years to 2008, New Zealand's balance of payments deficit averaged over 8% of GDP.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague's question is about 2010. It's about today and the future, not about the past, and these answers are not about his responsibility. The member put to the Minister 3 different policy options of the current government and asked the Minister to give an answer based on the current government's policies. Instead we get speeches about what previous governments have done.
Order. Now it's the Honourable Dr Nick Smith, who's fortunate that I'm in good humour today because a point of order is being heard and he should not be interjecting. I say to the Honourable Darren Hughes that the question was asked what had caused the least damage from memory out of a list of things. Well, it seems the Minister didn't agree, which was seeking the Minister's opinion. It seemed the Minister didn't agree with any of that list and added a bit to the list himself as to what was causing damage. And when questions seek opinions, there is no precise answer, and members may not like the answers, but the remedy's in members' hands. Ask tough questions, don't just seek opinions. The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, what did do damage to our national savings were the policies of the last government. And those policies led to a blowout in government spending, a blowout in consumer borrowing, and the worst record on balance of payments for decades, where the balance of payments deficit averaged over 8% of GDP from 2004 to 2008.
Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, what particular issues will the Savings Working Group consider?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the working group will consider further the impact of the tax system on national savings, but it won't be considering capital gains tax and land tax, which the government has ruled out. It will also be considering the role of KiwiSaver in improving national savings, but also the role of government, because there's not much point in if we lift KiwiSaver or household savings at the expense of putting government further into deficit.
Honourable David Cunliffe.
Speaker, given the Minister's fondness for history, perhaps I could rephrase my question. What did the most damage to New Zealand's savings stock? Cutting KiwiSaver, cutting the New Zealand Super Fund contributions, tax cuts for the wealthy, or Robert David Muldoon's decision to scrap the New Zealand superannuation scheme in the 1970s?
Order. Did the Minister hear the question? Because I say to his colleagues the level of interjection was unreasonable. The Right Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, what did damage our national savings was economic policy which in the last 9 years delivered a 3% increase in after-tax wages. So in 9 years under Labor, households had a 3% increase in their after-tax wages, and that meant they couldn't save.
Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister. Supplementary to the Minister. What policies have contributed to the poor performance of New Zealand's national savings over the past decade?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the policies that would contribute to higher national savings would be economic growth and rising household incomes, which gave New Zealanders the ability to save. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. From 2000 to 2009, the average ordinary time weekly wage after tax and inflation grew by only 3% in 9 years. So how could people save with an increase in their wages of 3% in 9 years?
Question number 2, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker.